February 16, 1981, began like any other day in the quiet town of Brookfield, Connecticut, but by the end of it, a man would be dead, and the American legal system would face a defense unlike anything it had ever encountered. 19-year-old Arne Johnson stood in the parking lot of a dog grooming salon with blood on his hands and confusion in his eyes. His landlord, Alan Bono, lay dying from multiple stab wounds inflicted in front of multiple witnesses. Arne did not run. He did not resist arrest. When police arrived, he seemed genuinely bewildered by what had just occurred, as if waking from a dream he could not quite remember. His girlfriend, Debbie Glatzel, had witnessed the entire attack, and what she saw would haunt her for years to come. The man she loved had seemingly disappeared during those violent moments, replaced by something else entirely, something that moved through him like a puppet master controlling strings. This was not a crime of passion or premeditation. There was no motive that investigators could identify. Arne had no history of violence, no criminal record, no indication whatsoever that he was capable of taking another human life. Yet the evidence was undeniable, and the witnesses were clear. What followed would make legal history and challenge the very foundations of criminal responsibility in America. To understand what happened that February afternoon, you have to go back months, earlier to the Glatzel family home, where 11-year-old David Glatzel was experiencing something his family could only describe as demonic possession. The boy reported seeing an old man with blackened eyes and rotting flesh who threatened him and spoke of violence and death. These were not the imaginings of an attention-seeking child. David exhibited physical phenomena that terrified everyone who witnessed them. He spoke in voices that were not his own, voices that seemed ancient and malevolent. He displayed knowledge he could not possibly have acquired through normal means. His body contorted in ways that defied natural movement. The family reached out to their church and eventually to Ed and Lorraine Warren, the renowned paranormal investigators who had built their careers on cases exactly like this one. The Warrens arrived and documented everything they witnessed. They recorded hours of interviews, took photographs, and brought in clergy to perform multiple exorcism rituals. Ed Warren, a demonologist, and Lorraine Warren, a clairvoyant, had seen many cases of alleged demonic activity, but what was happening to David Glatzel ranked among the most severe they had encountered. Arne Johnson was not a distant observer of these events. He was deeply involved with the Glatzel family as the boyfriend of David's older sister Debbie. He witnessed the possessions firsthand. He saw what the entity was doing to this child, and it moved him to action. During one particularly violent exorcism session, as David writhed and screamed, and the entity within him mocked the clergy attempting to cast it out, Arne Johnson did something that Ed Warren would later describe as both incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. He challenged the demon directly. He told it to leave the boy alone and take him instead. He offered himself as a substitute, believing perhaps that as an adult he could better withstand whatever torment David was enduring. According to the Warrens and the family members present, something shifted in that moment. David's episodes began to lessen in intensity and frequency, but Arne began to change. The changes were subtle at first. Debbie noticed him staring off into space with a vacant expression she had never seen before. He reported seeing the same old man David had described, the figure with the blackened eyes appearing to him in waking moments and in dreams. He experienced episodes he could not explain where time seemed to slip away from him, blackouts where minutes or even hours would pass, and he would have no memory of what had occurred. Those closest to him noticed he would sometimes speak in his sleep in voices that did not sound like his own, guttural and threatening voices that made the hair on their necks stand up. The Warrens documented all of this carefully. They recognized the signs. This was not mental illness in the conventional sense. This was demonic oppression, the stage before full possession where an entity begins to exert influence over a human host. They warned Arne and the family that the danger was escalating. They performed prayers and rituals designed to protect him. But the entity that had been tormenting David Glatzel had found a new vessel, and it was not letting go easily. On that February day, Arne and Debbie had gone to the dog grooming salon where Debbie worked. Alan Bono, their landlord, was there, and an argument broke out over something trivial that no one would later recall with any clarity. What happened next unfolded in front of witnesses who would testify in court. Arne's demeanor changed completely. His eyes seemed to glaze over. His face went blank. Then, with shocking suddenness, he attacked Bono with a knife, stabbing him repeatedly with a fury that seemed to come from nowhere. Witnesses described it as if Arne was not fully present, as if he was watching his own hands commit violence but had no control over them. When the attack stopped as suddenly as it had begun, Arne seemed to return to himself. He looked down at the dying man and at his own bloodied hands with genuine confusion and horror. He did not flee. He waited for the police in a state of shock that those who saw him described as authentic. Whatever had taken control of him in those moments had retreated, leaving him to face the consequences of actions he truly did not remember deciding to commit. The legal team representing Arne Johnson faced an impossible situation. Their client had clearly committed murder in front of witnesses. There was no way to argue innocence. But they had months of documentation from the Warrens, testimony from clergy who had participated in exorcisms, and statements from family members who had witnessed the progression of what they all believed was demonic influence. The defense attorney made the decision to pursue a defense never before attempted in American criminal history. They would argue that Arne Johnson was not guilty by reason of demonic possession. The media seized on the case immediately. It became an international sensation. The prosecution argued strenuously that this was a cynical ploy to avoid responsibility for a senseless murder. They brought in psychiatrists who evaluated Arne and found no evidence of mental illness that would meet the legal standard for insanity. The defense countered that possession was not a mental illness, but a spiritual reality that existing legal frameworks were simply not equipped to address. Ed and Lorraine Warren took the stand and testified to everything they had witnessed and documented. Ed Warren, who had investigated hundreds of cases over decades, spoke with absolute conviction about what had happened to David Glatzel and subsequently to Arne Johnson. He presented photographs, audio recordings, and written testimonies from clergy. He described in clinical detail the progression of demonic oppression he had observed in Arne during the months leading up to the murder. Lorraine Warren testified about what she had sensed clairvoyantly during her interactions with both David and Arne, describing a malevolent presence that moved between them like a contagion. The judge listened to all the evidence and ultimately made a ruling that would define the case. He declared that demonic possession could not be used as a defense before the jury because it could not be proven to the legal standard required in criminal court. However, he did allow some evidence of the Glatzel possession case to be presented as context for Arne's state of mind. The trial proceeded without the full demonic possession defense being argued to the jury, but everyone in that courtroom and everyone following the case in the media knew what was really being debated. This was a trial about the nature of evil itself, about whether spiritual forces could override human free will, about where responsibility lay when the supernatural intersected with the criminal. The jury deliberated and returned with a verdict. Arne Cheyenne Johnson was found guilty of first-degree manslaughter rather than murder, suggesting perhaps that they believed something had diminished his capacity even if they could not accept the possession explanation fully. He was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. He served approximately 5 years before being released on parole for good behavior. Debbie Glatzel waited for him. When he was released, they married, a testament to her unwavering belief that the man she loved had been a victim of forces beyond his control. Ed Warren spoke about the Arne Johnson case for the rest of his life. For him, it represented the most dangerous aspect of demonic activity, the ability of these entities to use human beings as weapons and then retreat, leaving destruction in their wake. He argued that this case proved demons were not simply confined to haunted houses or cursed objects. They could reach into the legal system, into the justice system, into the fabric of society itself by manipulating human behavior. The case has been written about extensively by legal scholars who debate its implications for criminal responsibility. Theologians have examined it as evidence of spiritual warfare manifesting in the modern world. Skeptics have dismissed it as a clever defense strategy exploiting religious belief, but the documented facts remain undisputed. A young man with no history of violence committed a brutal murder in front of witnesses and had no clear memory of deciding to do it. Months of documented religious intervention preceded the crime, involving multiple clergy members and experienced paranormal investigators. A court of law seriously considered demonic possession as a criminal defense for the first and only time in American history. The Arne Johnson case stands in the Warren archives as perhaps their most consequential investigation, not because of the phenomena documented, but because of what it revealed about how far the reach of the demonic could extend. It moved beyond scaring families in their homes or causing objects to move in the night. It reached into a human soul, turned that person into an instrument of death, and left the justice system struggling to comprehend what had really happened on that February day in Brookfield. Whether you believe in demonic possession or not, the Johnson case forces a disturbing question that neither the legal system nor science has adequately answered. If Arne Johnson did not choose to kill Alan Bono in any meaningful sense of the word choose, then who or what made that choice? And how do we hold accountable a force that operates beyond the reach of law? Hashtags Demon Possession Arne Johnson Ed and Lorraine Warren True Crime Paranormal Investigation The Conjuring Brookfield Murder The Devil Made Me Do It Demonic Defense Warren Files Supernatural Crime True Crime Story Haunted History Paranormal Documentary Vanishing Roads. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented paranormal case files. All events reference real investigations by Ed and Lorraine Warren.